listening to the CJ Sweat Show. We're going to start right now. I'm not bringing the bias here. You are.
What'd they do up there? Brainwash?
Hey, it's not my fault that your team is terrible.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
This is just honest. I'm sorry if it hurts. Oh wait, I'm not really sorry.
Put that coffee down.
Can't stop, won't stop. Where the brakes at? I give him that ditty bop. Like, take that, take that, take that, take that.
Live out of Central Virginia, this is the CJ Sweat Show. Thank you for joining us, no matter if you are listening in your car, if you're listening while you're working out. Always appreciate you guys taking the time to turn us on. If you are a fan of the show, here's how you can help me in the podcast app. However you listen, actually. Just about every platform has a way where you can rate the podcast. If you can go in there and give me a 5-star review, that really does go a long way. It is really big for me, so I always appreciate any type of reviews. If you don't think it's worthy of a 5 stars, then please, for the love of everything holy, send me a message so I know what to fix. Again, thank you guys for listening. Been a couple weeks. Last time I was on here, we had Ben King, and we did a lot of college football talk. He is one of my, he's a good friend of mine, but he and I always do a lot of college football stuff. He does stuff with the Auburn podcast. So today, I'm going to lead us off with some more college football talk. I have got an idea to fix the college football playoff. And in addition to that, I'm going to give you my 2019 NFL prediction. So we just had the Hall of Fame game. Preseason's right around the corner. This is one of my favorite times of the year because everybody is 0-0 right now. So we have absolutely no idea what the season beholds. I mean, college football, we've got a pretty good understanding of what's going to happen, right? Like Alabama, Clemson are going to dominate. There'll be some good teams mixed in there, but for the most part, it's going to be those two, plus maybe a Georgia or Oklahoma. The NFL, I think there's some things we probably know. Like, I think everybody knows New England should be really good, and Philly should be really good, and the Rams should be really good. But then there's a lot of things I think we don't quite know just yet. I think there's a lot of unknowns in the NFL because there are every year. I mean, there was a period of about 6 straight years where the NFC South champion was never consistent. Like, it was always a different team. And on top of that, the team that won it the year before would finish last that year. So there's always a lot. The NFL has so much parity. And the one thing I think it does the best job of is even when you have a dynasty like New England, I think just about every NFL team right now, I feel like everybody right now, every fan today, I think looks at this season and goes, yeah, we could be great. We might be terrible, but we could be great. So I think there's always that hope in college football. So or in the NFL rather. And so I'm excited for this season. I'm going to get to in just a minute as well. I've got one NFL team everybody is in love with. I'm not as much. I'm going to tell you who I am selling, and it's not, by the way, it is not who you think it is. I'm going to go and tell you right now, it's not Cleveland. Yeah, I'm not. I'm also selling them. I'm not as crazy about them as others. But there's another team everybody seems to love, and I look at it, and I've got a big, big caution flag on this one. But to start us off, college football. The season's getting ready to start. I'm excited about it. August 31st is the first real week of college football. But I can't help but look at the sport that we all love, and I still love it, and I'll still watch all of these games, but I feel like it's lost a lot of the momentum it used to have. College football, it used to be start of August, everybody was going crazy for college football. Everybody was going crazy. You had people preparing like their tailgates, people buying tickets and everything. There was a lot of talk that the preseason rankings were always fun. And I mean, we could look at it. We would debate who was like the 20th versus the 21st best team in the country. Now nobody cares about that. And I think people look at college football and it's like, yeah, it's dominated by 6 teams. But more than that, the sport has become incredibly regional. Unless you're Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, or in that sector of the country, you don't feel like you have a chance. Even the Big Ten teams, I feel like most Michigan fans, if they're honest with themselves, I don't think they feel that confident. I think Ohio State fans, if they're honest with themselves, look at the past couple of times they got into the playoffs and, it's not great. Performance isn't great. But I've got a plan to fix all of this. So the current problem with college football, there's a couple of big things that college football needs to address. Okay? The first problem is the postseason is completely saturated. Alabama and Clemson dominance isn't the only thing hurting the sport. It's not helping, but it's certainly not the only thing that's hurting it. It's the fact that we have 36 additional bowl games, many of which, by the way, occur the same weekend as the semifinal games, and the games that don't occur during the semifinals, they're all during the holidays. So, for example, I'm a big Duke fan. Duke a couple years ago played in the Motor City Bowl in Detroit, Michigan on December 23rd. There is no way I can convince my wife 2 days before Christmas to take a trip to Detroit, Michigan to watch a bowl game that has little to no meaning. Most of the bowls, by the way, resemble that. They don't resemble the Fiesta, the Rose Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Bowl. The playoff in the bowls would work if all the attention wasn't spread out through so many games, and instead we just focused on the 3 that matter the most. But instead, let's just throw this out there, if you're a Georgia fan, and your team doesn't make the playoff this year, are you really that crazy about watching Alabama and Clemson again? No. You will go and watch, though, Georgia play in the Sugar Bowl against Ohio State or whatever, or Washington. You'll get excited about that. But that again takes away from the excitement of the other 4 teams that made it into the playoff. But you don't care. Georgia plays on New Year's Day, so why do you need to watch a semifinal game? And the problem is fans of all of these teams, college football is not the NFL. We don't have like fantasy college football, or at least the same excitement around it, the way we do in the NFL. In the NFL, if I'm a Redskin fan and we start off the year 4-10, I'm still going to watch the season. Why? Well, because I'm betting on games, I've got fantasy going on, and I'm just genuinely interested in what happens. But in college football, if I'm a Georgia fan or if I'm an Oklahoma fan and we start off the year 5-2, my excitement's completely gone. I'm not looking at this and still excited about the season. And then when we get to the end of the year, I'm going to be more inclined to go see my team's last football game of the year rather than go and watch Georgia play Oklahoma in a playoff game in which whoever wins that is going to lose in the championship game to Alabama or Clemson. So we've got all of this saturation, and we've saturated it around the time when everybody's focus should be on the playoff. Could you imagine, by the way, if when they select the teams to make the playoff, okay, they say, okay, Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Oklahoma 3, Georgia 4. And they say that. Let's say, okay, good night, everybody. And there's no more games, just those 3 games, the semifinal games and the championship game. So only 4 teams out of the entire country now have a game left to play. Ohio State, your season's over. Washington, your season's over. Texas, your season's over. Could you imagine that? Okay, first of all, if that were the case, the next 3 weeks until those playoff games actually happen, the talk would be on the teams who didn't get into the playoff. And then when the games actually happen, we wouldn't be talking about bowl games. We would only be talking about the semifinal games. Here's the second issue right now that I see with college football is the non-conference portion of the schedule is absolutely horrendous. Alabama opens with my team, Duke. I'm a big Duke fan. We can't be your marquee game. Like the Chick-fil-A game to open up the year, the Chick-fil-A kickoff game, that's supposed to be a marquee game. It's Alabama and Duke. I'm a big Duke fan. Alabama's going to crush Duke. And by the way, of all the Duke teams to send down to Atlanta for this, in the past 5 years, this is probably the weakest squad. Like, they lost Daniel Jones off of last year's team, along with 3 other receivers. I'm not even a big Daniel Jones fan, but this Duke squad is not prepared for this game. Alabama's going to win this one like 50-7. If Duke scores 7, it'll be a miracle. We only have one true marquee game in the first 4 weeks, and that's when LSU plays Texas in week 2. And I don't think, if people are honest, I don't think most people have confidence that either of these teams are capable of reaching the playoff. That's the only marquee game in the first 4 weeks until we get to conference play. So what's the solution for all of this? Because I do believe there is a solution. I don't believe we have to continue to live in misery for this. So instead of, this by the way would fix everything, okay? The bowl games, instead of playing them at the end of the year, here is my fix. We're not going to eliminate them. First of all, they make way too much money to get rid of these bowl games. There's way too many of them. There's way too much money involved. There's way too many sponsors. And the schools, by the way, they make money on these too. So you can't get rid of them. But what we're going to do is, instead of them being played at the end of the year, we're going to have them played at the start of the next year. In addition to that, we're going to expand the playoff field. Not for the sake of expansion, for the sake of bringing meaning back to the regular season. So what do we expand it to? 6 teams. And I'm going to explain why 6 is important. But here's the thing about the bowl games. You're never going to eliminate these because they're too profitable. But imagine how much more profitable they would be if they actually held meaning. Like, we could take the playoff teams and we would line them up as their 1 through 6 seedings as they enter playoff games. So the Chick-fil-A game would be, instead of Alabama versus Duke, the Chick-fil-A game this year would be Alabama versus Ohio State. The Rose Bowl game this year, to start off the year, would be Clemson versus Georgia. So could you imagine if Labor Day weekend started out with those games, along with Auburn versus Purdue, which would be fun, Iowa versus Mississippi State, even like the lower tier games like Wake Forest versus Memphis, they would be entertaining. We would have 39 great games. And it wouldn't matter if you were Ball State, if you were Michigan, if you were Alabama, if you were Oklahoma, if you were USC. If you made one of these games to start off the year, you'd have a great game to start off the season. And by the way, think about the meaning. If we've got 6 teams getting into playoffs, that means the top 2 seeds get a bye. So this is why we expanded to 6, is because throughout the entire season, Nick Saban's sweating bullets if they drop a game. Because that could be the difference between the number 1 seed and the number 3 seed. Right now, if Nick Saban drops a game, he doesn't care. The game right now in college football is don't get the top seed. Nobody cares about that. The game in college football is just get yourself into the playoff. That's all you got to do. You drop 1, even 2, you could still be in. But if we expand to 6, you drop a game, oh, you might get into the playoff, but you're going to have to play the first week of the playoff. And then if you win that game, you're going to play a team that's coming off of a bye week. Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney place a ton of value on bye weeks. So could you imagine if there were a bye week leading up to playoffs that only the top 2 teams in the country had access to? Every single game would all of a sudden have meaning now. Alabama, if you lose to Georgia in the SEC title game, we'll still put you into playoffs, but you'll be the 5 seed, not the 1. That's the difference with this. The other thing is again, because the bowl games are happening at the start of the next season, the entire focus is just on these playoff games. Now, in addition to all of this, so the bowl games start the season. That's Labor Day weekend. Okay? Keep in mind, these are all neutral site venues. So back to convincing my wife to travel during the holidays. It's a heck of a lot easier to convince her to take a trip to Detroit, Michigan, or San Antonio during Labor Day weekend than it is 2 days before Christmas or on New Year's Eve. I can't convince her to travel during those times. I can't fathom, by the way, paying for it because I just spent a fortune paying for Christmas gifts. But Labor Day weekend, I get an extra day off of work. I don't really have many expenses. I'm doing a 1-day flight. I've got no problem with that. I could convince my wife to travel for that game. So these bowl games at the end of the year, they aren't working. They're still generating money. We're still watching them on TV, but we've got a lot of mediocre TV ratings with these games. None really stand out. And the playoff games, by the way, for 3 consecutive years have come down. This championship game was the lowest, and I want to say it was 7 or 8 years. So the playoff is not working. I'm never, by the way, I support playoff expansion. I will never support a playoff of 8 or 16 teams. I actually prefer the BCS system. And I think the BCS system did a better job than this playoff system. But, I mean, this is what we have. And the way sports generally work is once you expand, you never retract. Like, it never gets smaller. So, I don't think we're ever going to see the BCS system again. And I don't think the BCS system was perfect by any means. It certainly had its faults. I just liked it better than this. So I think right now the only potential to fix is through expansion. But if you expand to 8 or you expand to 16 teams, again, you're not creating more stress for Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney. You're just simply giving them more of an opportunity to separate. Because now there's less pressure on every single game. But if you expand to 6, the pressure of every single game comes back, and you expand to more teams, and the start of the season has that flair that it used to have. If we had Alabama versus Ohio State week 1, it would dominate our conversation. It would dominate radio and TV from now until Labor Day. It would be an entire month of college football dominating the news cycles. And by the way, this would be a nightmare for the NFL. A nightmare for the NFL because nobody would care about preseason games. Nobody would care about training camps anymore, really. We'd all be focused on Alabama, Ohio State, Auburn, Purdue. These games would mean so much more. Clemson versus Georgia. Start of the year, these games would have so much more meaning than they do at the end of the year. All right, so I'll move on to the NFL. Again, training camps are underway. I was at the Redskins training camp last weekend. A lot of fun. Witnessed the beginning of a fight. Actually, a couple days later, they had a fight. So that was interesting to watch the Redskins dysfunction live in action. Always a joy to see. There's a team right now, though, as we are on the cusp of the preseason. There's a team that everybody seems to love, and I'm just kind of struggling with it. Anytime these NFL power rankings come out in the preseason, I mean, preseason stuff I've always kind of laughed at, but the preseason power rankings are always my favorite to pick on, because people don't do research on these things. They don't research them at all. They just take the team's record from last year and just plug them into these power rankings. So, like, everybody right now has the Rams as, like, either... Actually, I've seen 2 power rankings where they've got the Rams as the best team in the league. That's preposterous. I've seen others where just about everybody else has them somewhere between 2nd and 4th, and I don't agree with that either. The Rams, to me, actually reminded me a lot of the 2017 Falcons. So for one, we've got losses to the staff. Just like the 2017 Falcons lost Kyle Shanahan, these Rams have losses to their staff. Matt LaFleur, offensive coordinator, he's gone. And then their quarterback coach, Zach Taylor, he's gone. This is part of the reason why, by the way, the NFL has so much turnover, and the reason why, like, you can go from 4th in your division to 1st and vice versa, and go from 1st to 4th, is because when you are really, really good, when a team is really, really good, they immediately lose 1 or 2 coordinators or a position coach. And that has such a tremendous effect on the team's chemistry, and you don't see it until the next year. It is very hard to replace. Even if you hire somebody good, it's very hard to replace a coordinator the very next season. So those losses to their staff are huge. The other thing is they've had losses to their roster. I mean, think about this. LaMarcus Joyner, safety, he's gone. Ndamukong Suh, he's gone. And Roger Saffold, an offensive guard, he's gone. Those were 3 star players they had last year. Gone. Most people are also worried about Todd Gurley's future. I kind of agree. But the other issue here, everybody wants to focus on Todd Gurley. And the because the Rams were a specific team with Todd Gurley, and then once he went down, it's like they were a completely different team offensively. I don't think it's just Todd Gurley. I think a bigger problem potentially for the Rams was Cooper Kupp's injury. And this isn't like a video game. Like in a video game, if somebody goes out in the wild card weekend of playoffs or in week 16 of the regular season and it says injured for the remainder of the season, the very next season, like they're ready to go beautifully. In real life, it doesn't work that way. In real life, if you have a 10-month injury that puts you out for the rest of the season, not only are you out for the rest of the season, you're not available until October. Okay, so like these injuries that end a player's season, you have to look at the timeline on them. Like Cooper Kupp and Todd Gurley aren't going to be ready week 1 to play 100%. That's a big concern for me for these Rams. Also, Jared Goff, I think, has a great arm. I like a lot of what he does, but he's kind of proven to be limited at times. I mean, if you watch that Super Bowl, he struggled to do anything. And the best comparison I've heard to Jared Goff is actually Matt Ryan. So this really feels like the 2017 Rams. Then there's also this part of it to add into this. Sean McVay is currently the hottest coach in the league. He had 2 assistants hired as coaches, and they were both offensive assistants. Next to Belichick, like he appears to be the most revered coach among GMs and owners. So put yourself in the shoes of an opposing head coach. Like, what's the game in the NFL? It's job longevity. Nearly everyone is one bad season away from getting fired. No matter what you've done, you're one bad season away from getting fired. So how do you keep your job in the NFL? Well, you have to be able to go to your owner or your GM and say, well, that guy McVay everybody loves, yeah, I beat him. So I don't believe most coaches like seeing this young guy just kind of take over the league after a couple good years and he gets all of this attention. Not to mention it happens in Los Angeles of all of the places. Dan Quinn didn't get this much attention. Doug Peterson didn't. Andy Reid didn't. Pete Carroll, nope. So I think every coach in the league, when they see the Rams are on their schedule for the upcoming weekend, I think they're putting in an extra couple of hours the week they play LA. I think that plays into it. And then also, Seattle, I think will be improved. Seattle lost hardly anybody from last year's team. All they did was add more players on defense. And San Francisco brings back Garoppolo, and I think they had a good draft. So both of those teams, I think, got better this offseason. The Rams are still going to be good. It's not that I think the Rams fall off a cliff, but I don't buy them as a top 5 team in the top 5 team in the league this year. I think they're probably somewhere between 9 to maybe 11 wins. I think that's their ceiling, and they will be back eventually. I think at some point we're going to see the Rams back in the Super Bowl. I think Jared Goff probably wins a Super Bowl at some point. I just look at this year and I see a ton of red flags when it comes to LA. I still think they're good. I'm going to give you my predictions for every single team and the record for every team here in just a minute. But if there's one team I would struggle to bet on this year, it's going to be the Rams. I think there's too many factors playing into this that could potentially put the Rams in a tight spot. And I think they get into playoffs, but I think they kind of stumble their way there. I don't think they just get in easily. I think it's going to be a tough task for them to get in. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break because I need to have something to drink. My voice is falling apart. And when we come back, we're going to go division by division, team by team. I'm giving you everybody's record for the upcoming 2019 season. You don't want to miss that. This is the CJ Sweat Show, and we'll be right back. All right, CJ Sweat Show back again. Thank you all. Thank you to everybody for listening to me. Always appreciate it. I'm going to remind you one more time, if you can, if you're on your phone and it's safe to do so, don't do this if you're driving. Please don't do this if you're driving. But if it's safe to do so, please go into the podcast app, rate our show. Love, obviously, 5-star reviews, but the more ratings you can give us, the better. So please do that. Without further ado, I'm going to give you my 2019 NFL predictions. I'm really excited about the season. We're going to start off in the NFC, and then I'm going to switch things over to the AFC. So here, let's start things off with the NFC North, okay? We're going to go 4th to 1st in all of these divisions. So last in the NFC North, I think, is Detroit. Listen, I'm not a big believer in Matt Patricia. I liked Matt Stafford until they paid him, and then for some reason after they paid him, he went downhill. I don't think this team is assembled really well together. I think they're capable of winning a lot of games. Matt Stafford obviously has a big arm, but I just think there's too many holes on this roster, and I think if they're bad enough, Matt Patricia could get fired. Here would be the real interesting thing. In the NFL, there's always 2 to 3 teams every year where you can kind of tell by week 8 those players have quit. I would circle Detroit as one of those teams. I think those players by week 8, week 9 could just be tired of Matt Patricia's nonsense, and I think they could just quit on him. I've got Detroit going 5-11. All right, 3rd in the NFC North. Listen, the 1st to 3rd in this division, I think, is going to be a bloodbath. I think it's going to be a back and forth all year long. So, like, any of these 3 teams, I could see winning it. I think this division is wide open, but 3rd, I have Chicago. I thought a lot of what they did last year was smoke and mirrors. I still don't buy Mitch Trubisky. I do buy Matt Nagy. I think he's a great head coach, and I think he is the guy you want in Chicago long term. I think this team will be better next year than this year, but I've got them going 8-8. Their schedule, by the way, last year they had a pretty workable schedule. This year they do not. Last year they were in a lot of close games that they happened to win. I don't buy that as sustainable. When you are smoke and mirrors and just barely surviving, I don't buy it as sustainable. I've got Chicago going 8-8. 2nd in the division, I've got Minnesota, and I also have them going 8-8. So listen, Minnesota, this is, I think, one of the most put together rosters in the NFL. But they have a really tough schedule. They've got a lot of night games, actually. And Kirk Cousins in night games is absolutely awful. Minnesota's going to play a night game in Washington this year. I think it's a Thursday night game. That to me bothers me. And they've got a night game. I believe it's in Seattle, like in week 13 of the season. That one, I think if you are a bettor, you want to bet against Minnesota on that game. It's in Seattle, Monday night game, Minnesota at Seattle, week 13 of the season. That, I think, is an automatic loss. Minnesota is going to be really good, but I just think they barely miss out on playoffs. I've got them going 8-8. And then winning the North, I have Green Bay. Matt LaFleur comes in as the head coach. I think he's really, really bright. I think he was a big reason why the Rams were so good last year. And I think Aaron Rodgers obviously is crazy talented. But I've got questions about this team's defense, for one. And I've also got questions about, will Aaron Rodgers allow Matt LaFleur to have the control he needs to for this team to be successful? That, to me, is a concern. I think Green Bay is going to be really, really good. But again, this is the case every year. We are one small hit away from Aaron Rodgers being done for the year again. So I like Green Bay, but I'm cautious about it. I've got Green Bay winning the division at 9-7. Now let's go over to the NFC South. 4th in this division, I've got Lobsters, Tampa Bay, Jameis Winston, or is it Crab Legs? It's Crab Legs, not Lobsters. I've got Crab Legs in 4th. Listen, Tampa Bay, I like Bruce Arians. I think eventually you're going to see him improve this Tampa Bay team. I thought he did wonders in Arizona. But I don't buy Jameis Winston, and I don't buy any part of this defense. They've got Mike Evans, a tremendous receiver, but the rest of this team, gives me a lot of pause. I don't think there's any consistency here, and I think too, Tampa Bay's I think the upward leadership is looking at next year's draft class, and they see a couple of quarterbacks that would be really nice pieces. So I don't think you're going to get really good game plans. I'm not saying Tampa is going to throw games away, but I think if they get into week 9 and they're sitting there like 2-6 or 2-5, I think this team, you're going to start to see them making a play for the draft rather than a play for the playoffs, and I just don't think they're talented. They've got a lot of holes all over that team. Offensive line, not great. They don't have a legitimate pass rush. Their secondary is not great. The defense has a ton of problems. So I've got Tampa going 4-12. Third in the NFC South, I have Carolina. This will be the peskiest team in the league to play because of how good they are on defense. But they're going to be so annoying if you are a Carolina fan, because I just think there is a lot of tension there with Cam Newton, both in his camp and in the Carolina camp. I don't see that resolving itself this year, but you do have pieces like Christian McCaffrey, and this is a good offensive line, so you've got pieces in Carolina to allow them to win some games. So they're going to win some games. They're going to upset some people. They're going to play spoiler. I don't see them getting into playoffs. I've got Carolina going 8-8. Second in the NFC South, I actually have the Saints. I think they're going to take a step back. This is another team everybody seems to love. But did you watch Drew Brees at the end of last year? Not the same quarterback. And this team, I think mentally, is going to be so hung up over that pass interference call from last year. I think starting early on in the year, the Saints are going to be struggling with that. So I think that becomes a big issue. And I don't know defensively. I mean, keep in mind, this team defensively used to be one of the 5 worst teams in the league on a consistent basis. I watched what they did last year. They had a pretty favorable schedule for the most part. And then when they finally got LA in the playoffs, where they looked really good defensively, LA was missing a bunch of their offensive players. So I don't buy the Saints defense. I think Drew Brees is aging. They're going to be good, but I think they're just narrowly going to miss out on playoffs. I had the Saints going 9-7 and winning the division. I think the team making a bounce back this year is going to be Atlanta. Listen, I love Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. I think those are probably, I know everybody's so in love and enamored with Cleveland's wide receiving core. I think Atlanta actually has the best wide receiving core in the league. I think Matt Ryan still has a good bit of juice in the tank. Devontae Freeman comes back. He was injured for last year, so he comes back. I think that's a big deal. And they've added a lot of pieces on that defense. They need to get a good pass rush going. But if Atlanta gets that together, I think they are a legitimate Super Bowl threat. I've got the Falcons going 10-6. Now we go over to the NFC East. Finishing 4th in the division, I have the Giants. I have them going 5-11. Listen, I'm just not hype on this team. I'm not crazy about Odell Beckham, but I don't think losing him necessarily helps Eli Manning's case. I think this team will actually probably be pretty good early on, but then once it gets colder, Eli's not going to have as much zip on the ball. They're going to start losing a couple of games. There's going to be tension there again. This will be kind of like Carolina, a pesky team to play. If you have a game at MetLife Stadium against the Giants, I think it's a tough game to win, but I don't see the Giants having a legitimate chance to make the playoffs, so I've got them going 5-11. Also going 5-11, I have the Washington Redskins, my team. Listen, I have no idea what's going on at quarterback. I was at training camp a week ago, and honestly, you want to know who looked better than anybody else at quarterback? It was Colt McCoy. Wasn't Case Keenum. Wasn't Dwayne Haskins. Colt looked more in control of that team, looked more in control of the sidelines, made better throws than those other two guys did. I think he actually could be the starter for this team. Now, the Redskins, they're interesting. They have a lot of really nice pieces. But they don't have a legitimate offensive line. They're losing Trent Williams, by the way. He's holding out, and they're going to trade him. In addition to that, their offensive line can never stay healthy. Jay Gruden, I think if they finish 5-11, the Redskins are going to fire him at the end of the year. So I think kind of like the Lions, midway point of the season, if the Redskins are already out of playoffs, do the players just kind of quit on Gruden? I'm a Gruden fan, but I think him being able to contain this locker room is going to be tough. And I think fans, by the way, Redskins had the hardest first 4 games in the league. They start off at Philly. They come home to play Dallas. They've got a game against New York, and then they play New England. They're going to start off best case scenario 1-3, I think. Best case scenario. And then I think fans start yelling for Dwayne Haskins to come in. He'll be good. He could be good, but he's not ready yet for this league. So I've got the Redskins going 5-11. Finishing second in the NFC East is Dallas, and I think Dallas is going to be a really, really good team despite whatever happens with Zeke. Zeke is a big reason why this team can win games. He is not the only reason. He's not even the main reason. Dak's leadership, Amari Cooper's quiet ability to distract the defense and get open, and he is so crucial on first downs. That's a big part of it. This defense, though, is one of the big reasons why Dallas is going to be so good. They have one of the best linebacking cores, I think, in the league. They also have a really good offensive line. Their biggest question mark is probably that secondary, but I think they'll be fine. So I've got Dallas going 10-6. And then winning the NFC East, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. This, though, again, a caution. What happens if Carson Wentz gets hit a couple of times? Is he physically ready? Like last year we saw with the Colts. Andrew Luck comes back, but it really took him a good 5 to 6 games to get into the rhythm of things. I wonder about that with Carson Wentz. Will the Eagles, first 4 or 5 games of the year, will they be playing up to par? Because this is going to be a neck-and-neck finish with Dallas, and the NFC, for the most part, is wide open. So I wonder about Carson Wentz and his physical ability start of the year. Is he physically ready to go? Listen, every other part about this team I don't love. I've got the Eagles going 11-5. NFC West, let's go over to that. I have Arizona going 2-14. Listen, I forget the Kyler Murray stuff. I have zero faith in Cliff Kingsbury. I think this is the worst hire of a head coach I've ever seen. Literally, I don't even understand how they figured this one out. You go and hire a coach who was fired by a mediocre Big 12 program just a year ago. And by the way, USC hired him as a coordinator, and then he's willing to bolt from that just to jump on your head coaching, just to jump into your head coaching job. I don't like how that looks at all. I think the metrics of that are very, very bad. But in addition to that, what has Cliff Kingsbury done to prove he's a good head coach and not just a good coordinator? I think Cliff Kingsbury is a fantastic offensive mind, but I don't have any proof that he can lead a locker room. And, by the way, the whole reason Arizona brought Cliff Kingsbury in is because of his connection to Kyler Murray. Well, we do understand that Kyler Murray twice turned down Cliff Kingsbury. So, literally, the whole reason Arizona hired Cliff Kingsbury was because he pursued a recruit who denied him twice. And that would be like putting a guy on The Bachelor because he had been denied a bunch of times by dates. Like, we wouldn't do that. That doesn't make any sense. So, listen, I don't buy Arizona at all. And even if Cliff Kingsbury is the guy, I think Kyler Murray's not nearly ready for this league. And this team has massive holes, both on the offensive and defensive side. Arizona, I think, will be abysmal in 2019. I have them going 2-14. Third in the NFC West is the San Francisco 49ers. I think this team will be drastically improved from last year. They've got Garoppolo coming back, but it's not that I don't trust Garoppolo. Garoppolo, I think, is a good quarterback and will win games for San Francisco. My concern with this team is I still think they've got issues on the defense, and they don't have an elite outside weapon on this team, and the offensive line, I think, is mediocre. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's bad. I think it's purely average. I do like the coaching. I like Kyle Shanahan. I think that gives them some wins. I think they're going to be really good at home, but they've got 4 tough divisional games. The NFC is going to be tough, so I've got the 49ers going 9-7. Second in the NFC West, I have the LA Rams. I've got them going 10-6. Listen, I've already told you what I think about the Rams. I think the schedule is going to be tough. I think this division will be tougher than it was last year. They're not just going to blow everybody out. They've lost offensive weapons. We don't know what we're getting with Cooper Kupp. We don't know what we're getting with Todd Gurley. And Goff is good, but he's limited. Sean McVay, everybody's going to have tape on him, and every single head coach in the league will want to beat him. So I've got the Rams going 10-6. They're a playoff team, but they're not winning this division. The team that I think is winning the NFC West is Seattle. I love this team. All right, Russell Wilson. Some players sign a big contract and they fall off a map. Some players sign a big contract and they succeed even more. I think that will be the case with Russell Wilson. I absolutely love him. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he's got a very smart mind. Now, he doesn't have a lot of weapons to throw to. But if you watched Seattle last year, they went back to doing what they did previously. They're an elite run team once again. And they're great defensively. They've got a lot of young players on this defense. The one secret sauce to paying Russell Wilson is that this team could afford to, because they've got a lot of youth. I think Seattle is going to be really, really good this year. Again, I think the NFC West is neck and neck all year long. I like Seattle, but I don't think the Rams are out of it by any stretch of the imagination. I have Seattle winning 10-6 and just getting the divisional tiebreaker, because I think they'll be better in division than the Rams will be. So I've got Seattle winning the division at 10-6. All right, so there you are. So if all of this happened, your NFC playoff would look like Philly is the 1 seed, Atlanta as the 2, Seattle as the 3, and Green Bay as the 4. Then your wild card teams would be LA as the 5 and Dallas as the 6. New Orleans would just miss, San Francisco would just miss, and Carolina would just miss. So there's your NFC picture. All right, now we're going to head over to the AFC. So the AFC, we'll start off in the AFC North. We're going to go 4-12 again. In fourth, I have Cincinnati. Listen, I don't trust Andy Dalton. I'm not a big fan of Joe Mixon at all. I think he presents a lot of locker room issues. They bring in a new head coach. They were really lazy in the head coach hiring department. I don't know that I trust that at all. I think Cincinnati is going to be really bad this year. I've got them going 4-12. Third, I have Baltimore. Again, I think like Chicago, a lot of what Baltimore did last year was smoke and mirrors. I don't buy into that as a long-term strategy, but I will say this. John Harbaugh had a lot of other opportunities at the end of last year, and he stayed in Baltimore. And I think he did it because he has faith in Lamar Jackson. So I think this is long-term. I think this is sustainable. But I think this year they're going to fall back just a little bit. The division gets tougher, by the way. So I've got Baltimore going 8-8. Second in the NFC North, I've got Cleveland. And I think they'll be good. I think they're going to be really good probably early on in the year. But what I worry about is late October, they lose a couple of games. And Odell is off the hinges. What happens then? If Odell overreacts to a call or gets into an argument with Baker, I don't think the team has the proper support to withstand that. And I don't know what I'm getting in Freddie Kitchens as a head coach. Nobody wanted him even as a coordinator last year. This was a position coach that got promoted. The last time I saw a position coach get promoted like that was when Jim Zorn got promoted in D.C., and we all saw how that turned out. Cleveland's got talent. They're going to be really, really good. Baker's going to make some really wildly nice throws this year, but I think they just miss out on playoffs. I have them going 9-7. And winning the AFC North is the team that I think will be the most improved team in 2019, Pittsburgh. Listen, I can't stand Pittsburgh. Next to Dallas, this is probably my least favorite team in the league, but I cannot ignore Pittsburgh's offseason. They got rid of Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, the two biggest distractions they have probably had in over a decade. They're both gone. I think there are occasions in an office where Somebody leaves, maybe even you like them. Maybe even you're friends with them outside of work. But they leave and you walk into the office and you're like, you know what? It feels really nice in here today. Doesn't the air just kind of feel better? It's just a little bit more positivity. I think some people can be a cancer in a locker room or in an office, and I think that's the case with both Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. They're both gone. And on top of that, Cleveland has been talking nonstop trash. A team that didn't win the division last year. Cleveland's been talking nonstop trash for the past 8 months. I think I'm tired of hearing that. I think Pittsburgh comes in super focused because they're tired of hearing it. I think Ben Roethlisberger is focused. They have a legitimate run game, and they have added a number of defensive players to this defense. I think Pittsburgh is going to be very good this year. I have the Steelers going 12-4 this year, and they will win the AFC North. All right, AFC South. I think this is pretty similar to the NFC North in that I think the top 3 teams, it's pretty wide open. But fourth, I've got Tennessee. I think Tennessee is the Carolina of the AFC. Like, really, we've got a quarterback we're a little bit unsure about. He kind of plays on the run. It's a little bit unpredictable. But the rest of this roster, I think everybody really likes. Defensively, they look good. They've got a legitimate pass rush. Offensively, they've got legitimate weapons. They've got a real running game with Derrick Henry at running back. There's a lot of things about Tennessee to love. But I just think we don't know what we're getting with Marcus Mariota. And they've got a really tough schedule to play this year. So I've got the Titans going 7-9. All right, third in the AFC South, I've got Houston. I think this division from third to first is going to be wide open. It's going to be back and forth all year long. I like Deshaun Watson a lot. I actually think he's probably a top 8 quarterback in this league. Not kidding. I don't think it's not exaggeration. But my problem is this offensive line is absolutely abysmal. My problem is I don't know what I'm getting on defense. Now, I love what I'm getting wide receiver-wise. I love what I'm getting running game-wise. And I love what Deshaun Watson brings to the table. They've got a lot of pieces. They just don't have the offensive line. And I just don't think they have the secondary to win big games. So I think Houston they're going to go 9-7. I think a lot of their 7 losses are going to be really close games, though. Second in the AFC South, I've got Jacksonville. It's funny. If I were doing a power ranking, I would have Houston ranked above Jacksonville, but Jacksonville has a more favorable schedule. I also think this offensive line is better than Houston, and I think Nick Foles brings stability to this team. I don't buy Nick Foles as being better than Carson Wentz, but I think he brings stability. I think had Jacksonville had a better quarterback a couple of years ago than Blake Bortles, I think they could have won the Super Bowl. But again, I think there are still some legitimate holes. We don't know what we're getting with Leonard Fournette. I think he regressed majorly last year. I think that's a big question mark. And we don't know what we're getting with this linebacking core. And I think that's a big problem. But I love most of what Jacksonville brings to the table, especially with Nick Foles. I've got Jacksonville going 9-7 this year. And winning the AFC South, I have Indianapolis. Listen, all this team did, they bring back just about everybody from last year. And then they added 10 picks in the first 4 rounds of the draft. They had 10 picks. Indianapolis is going to be really good this year. They've got a bit of a tough schedule, but I have the Colts going 11-5 and winning the South. AFC East. All right, finishing fourth, I have Buffalo. I've got them going 3-13. I'm not a big believer in Josh Allen. I'm certainly not a big believer in this coaching staff. In addition to all of that, they don't have one piece about this team that excites me. The only reason I think they'll be better than Arizona is because their schedule is not as rough as Arizona's is, and this division is not as bad as Arizona's is. So I've got Buffalo going 3-13. I don't think they'll be good. Miami, I have finishing third in the AFC East. I love Josh Rosen. I know a lot of people question him. I think he was in a very bad situation last year in Arizona. But I think they're going to start Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they should. I hope Ryan Fitzpatrick plays all of the games this year. And I hope they save Josh Rosen for next year. Because if this team can get some good draft picks next year, they could be a real threat. But right now, they don't have any legitimate outside weapons. This offensive line isn't very good. Actually, the offensive line is terrible. Defensively, they don't have a good pass rush, really, but they've got a good secondary. I look at Miami. I think they'll be good at times. I think they could start off like 2-1. But I think they're going to finish off the year 5-11, and I think they're going to run into some really tough AFC games. They'll be good at home, though. They will be good at home. Second in the AFC East, I think the Jets are going to be improved. I think Le'Veon Bell is a good fit into the system. They bring in Jamison Crowder, who I think actually is a perfect fit for Sam Darnold, who I also think improves. Remember, Baker Mayfield is 2 years older than Sam Darnold. Okay, so Sam Darnold was a young kid last year who I thought at the end of the year improved greatly. I think that improvement continues to this year. Now, they don't have the defensive pieces just yet, but I think a couple good drafts and this team's going to be good. They will be pesky this year. They're not a playoff team. I've got the Jets at 8-8. Number one, I have New England winning the division, obviously. Listen, I don't want to hear what people are saying in September if they start off 1-2. I don't care what their September record is. Wake me up. Listen, New England's theme song should be, wake me up when December ends. And if at the end of December, this team is struggling to make playoffs, then I'll buy that the dynasty is over. Potentially. But for right now, this team is still really good. I do think them losing Rob Gronkowski is a big deal, but they still play a weak schedule. This division is still theirs. They've got a stronghold on it, or a stranglehold on it. I don't think they're going to have any trouble winning the AFC East. I have New England going 13-3. And now, potentially, my favorite division to watch this year, the AFC West. Finishing fourth, I have Oakland. Listen, I just don't buy John Gruden long-term in this league, but I do buy Derek Carr, and I do buy this offensive line, and I do buy this defense. So they've got pieces, but I just don't buy John Gruden. I think Oakland is capable of beating anybody in this league, but I don't think they're capable of going on multiple winning streaks, so I've got them going 6-10. They're going to be somewhere between 5 to 8 wins. Third in the AFC West, I have Denver. Again, I think Denver is going to be very similar to Baltimore this year. Defensively, this team's absolutely amazing. They've got a good run game. But again, I don't know what I'm getting with the offensive line. I think that's a struggle here. Joe Flacco has looked... Last year, he was so all over the place. So I don't know what we're getting there with him this year. I think he should be... I think he should come back better. I think this should be kind of a refreshing year for him going into a new situation. And I like some of their pieces, but again, I just wonder about that, and they're bringing in a new head coach. I don't have a lot of confidence in that. Denver, I have going 8-8. All right, second in the AFC West, I have the Chargers. I'm really skeptical about this, though. And I'll tell you this. It is because whenever it seems like the Chargers come into a season with high hopes, they end up just falling off the map. And whenever the Chargers come into a season where we think they're going to be terrible, they kind of surprise us all. This is one of the most difficult teams to predict. Also, Phillip Rivers is getting older, and we don't have any idea what's happening with Melvin Gordon. I think all of that is legitimate question marks for this team, but they've got one of the best pass rushes in the league. They've got a really good offensive line. And Phillip Rivers last year was great. So I don't really have reason to doubt him other than the number that is his age. I have the Chargers going 9-7. And then winning the AFC West, I do have the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs will take a minor step back from last year. They lose Kareem Hunt. I think that's a big deal. They lose a couple players on defense. Some of their defensive pass rush. I think that's a big deal. But other than that, Pat Mahomes comes back. Andy Reid is still the head coach. Andy Reid's been a great head coach. And I don't think there's really a team in this division that matches up well with Kansas City. So I think Kansas City's going to win a lot of divisional games. I have the Chiefs going 12-4. So what that does for the playoffs is that would give us, in our wild card games, that's going to give us Kansas City against the Chargers, the 3-6 game. Jacksonville would go into Indianapolis, the 5-4 game. In the NFC, the Rams would play at Green Bay, and then Dallas would play at Seattle. And then our divisional teams, or our bye week teams, would be the Falcons in the NFC and the Eagles. And then over in the AFC, it would be the Patriots and the Steelers. And that's the way I think the season's going to go. I think a couple of teams to keep your eye on that may surprise you a little bit. Carolina, I keep coming back to this team. Carolina is so well built. If Cam Newton would just humble himself a little bit, allow himself to be coached, and sit back in the pocket, and by the way, learn to throw a screen pass, Carolina could win 12 games. But I don't know that he does that. I don't know that he humbles himself. It's like they had that one great season, and then Cam Newton stopped listening to anybody. If he does, though, I think Carolina could be really good. The other team I think I would probably keep my eye on is, it's tough for me with the Jets. I like Sam Darnold, but I think he's young. But I think he's got a lot of really good pieces here, and this team's young, and they bring in a new head coach. I've got the Jets going 8-8, but it wouldn't shock me if they found a way to win 10 games this year. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch. I just don't think they're there yet. But again, circle them because there's a very high ceiling there. I'd keep your eye on those two teams. The teams in my predictions I feel the least confident about, again, the Chargers. I don't know Aaron Rodgers Phillip Rivers with his age, what we're getting there. I think we're going to see a lot of what we saw last year, but we also saw that team go into New England and just get destroyed. So I wonder about that. The other team I think has a pretty low floor is Green Bay. Is Aaron Rodgers willing to work with a new coach? And will Aaron Rodgers play all 16 games this year? I think those are very legitimate questions for the Packers. So I've got them winning the NFC North, but again, it would not shock me if Detroit or if Chicago takes this division, and it wouldn't shock me if Minnesota found a way to take this division. The only thing about that would shock me is if Kirk Cousins found a way to win night games. That would be the only thing I'd be like, oh, that's surprising. But there are your NFL predictions. All right, I want to thank all of you guys for listening. Again, make sure to go and rate the show. We will be back soon as the NFL gets closer and college football gets closer. This is the CJ Sweat Show.
I feel like money.